My throat's getting sore from all this talking. Okay, so welcome back. Today is part 2 of the kitchen process here at the estate, and today we are going through making it a kitchen. Part 1, which was last week, and if you haven't watched that, I behoove you to do so because it might add some context to things. In part 1, it was all about the demolition, what the design was going to be, and then making it a space that was ready for outfitting. And today we're gonna outfit it. You're also gonna see some pictures today that might be in other rooms of the house in various states of completion, just because that was the staging area for some things, like getting started right now with the cabinets. So the cabinets were ordered from a company called the RTA Store. You can order custom cabinets through them to fit your space. I have never designed a kitchen, believe it or not. I had no idea how to design for cabinets. Now, I knew my dimensions of the kitchen, obviously, and you can very helpfully put it into a space planning tool on their website. Apart from length of walls that I had, a lot of it was, I'm not gonna say guesswork, because it wasn't guesswork. A lot of it was imagining what it's gonna look like on your walls. And it required a lot of math on my part. I might have made it more difficult than I needed to make it, to be honest. You have several options of how you want to order them. I chose the least expensive, which was this kind of shaker front style in white. Now, in my mind, they were primed white because I was going to be painting them. So I was like, great, they're primed, ready for paint, let's do it. So you can order them in 2 ways, either pre-built, which was more expensive, or flat packed, and they're shipped to you on a pallet. I had no problem building myself. I wanted to do it. If it was gonna save me a buck. I was only going to be ordering the cabinets though for this wall that you see behind me, because the wall where the refrigerator and the oven were going to go, they did not sell what I wanted. They had a cabinet for a wall oven to go into, but the dimensions were not correct. Stuff you could put above a fridge, but because the ceilings are so high in the kitchen, that was also not going to work. I ordered this wall. I'm not going to talk about anything you see in this photo other than the cabinets. Front living room was where I was going to be building everything because there was really nothing going on up there after the initial flooring tear out. So I knew, okay, it's a clean space. I can stage everything. We've got these giant folding picnic tables that my parents had brought over, and I can build stuff on top of it. They went together super easy. The sides, back, and bottom of the cabinets are plywood, but the front is birch wood, so it's real wood, and the doors are birch as well. Putting it together, you know, I will say the instructions were not easy, but once you've put one of them together, they're all pretty much the same. So it's just kind of finding the rhythm of what you're doing. I got to work, and I actually had a blast putting these together. I'd say it was a 98% successful endeavor. There were some things that were misaligned, not in a way that was detrimental to anything we were doing. I want to say for all the cabinets that I purchased for them, which was, yes, it was this wall. It was also the pantry cabinets and then the laundry room. I want to say altogether it might have been $4,000 for all of these, and that's including the shipping. Not bad. If you ask me, that's not bad. And this was one of the things that I had the cash on hand from selling my last house. This was one of the things that cash was going to be going toward. As work days were going on in the kitchen, I would bring like 1 or 2 pieces in here so I could just kind of stare at it and daydream about, oh, what's it gonna be like? And I'd kind of pull the drawers out to just screwing around. Eventually, it was time to actually get moving on this. I ordered hardware from Amazon. I'll put the links for everything below, by the way, of product that I talk about. Again, I'm not sponsored by anybody, but I wanted this kind of vintage looking brass. I want brass throughout my entire house. At my first home, I had some brass, and then upstairs it was all nickel. At the last house, everything was bronze. I love brass. I don't love shiny brass. For this, it was kind of like an oil rubbed. There was just, you know, some definition to these things. I put myself down a lot. I know some people will comment on, I call myself stupid a lot or dumb. I don't think that I'm a dumb person. I say that in a very self-deprecating manner because sometimes you have to laugh at yourself before anybody else does. That being said, I don't think I am the smartest person in the room. I was so impressed with myself with how the kitchen cabinets laid out because it was almost perfect. I didn't screw up. And that was a very exciting thing for me to step in on this. Yeah, it was a lot of work. It was a lot of math. It was a lot of drawing it out on paper, the dimensions of every single cabinet lined up above the little pictures that I had drawn, just adding, and subtracting from everywhere and doing it frontwards and backwards. It laid out how it was supposed to. And what was important was that these had to get put in here because the kitchen counters needed to be measured. This all was going on probably in mid-April of 2023. I wouldn't move in until June 6th, so there was plenty of time still. But the counters were gonna take a little more than a month, I wanna say, to get in. The earlier we could get the cabinets in, the better. I bought this apron front farmhouse sink. I got it off of Wayfair. It was gonna be a little bit bigger than the apron front cabinet allowed for. The amount of stress it caused my father and I figuring out how to mount that stupid sink in the cabinet. This is when it pays for itself to have someone do this for you or install these things for you, because people in these businesses know what they're doing. We did not. We figured it out. It took a lot, and it was a lot of second guessing each other, and ultimately I was the one calling the shots, and if I say, yep, we're doing it, then we're doing it, and if it screws something up or if it destroys that cabinet, that's on me. But my dad just never wanted to be the person that was causing the errors. So there was a lot of, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you double sure? In hindsight, I wish I had not purchased this color of sink. I wish I had gone more with perhaps a gray color. This color, I got it because I thought it would hide stains better. I might as well have just purchased a white sink. Once the sink was in and everything was starting to get attached to the walls, which had to happen before the counter measuring could occur, everything had to be level and on the wall. Now, I mentioned last week that part of the mission of this kitchen was to unite the spaces because there is a foot drop in the ceiling height, which it's still 8 feet in this part of the room, but it's 9 feet over there. The kitchen as it was when I purchased the house felt very disjointed in 2 different spaces. I wanted it to feel like one. To do that meant putting, I don't even know if you can see this, and if you can't, I'm so sorry. It meant putting the hood in. The hood, as you can see in this image, was going to straddle those ceilings. This was a good idea at the time. I have a lot to say about the hood over this. I'm not gonna waste your time with it right now, but I have a lot to say about this goddamn hood. I'm happy with how it looks now, but this ended up being the bane of my existence. Once the cabinets were in place and we knew where the actual cooktop was going to exist, we could start framing in. The cooktop itself, I want to say, is 33 inches wide. In my mind, I thought, okay, well then you need a hood that's going to be at least that wide, if not wider. So I spent $800 on this 36-inch wide professional hood, which all it does is vent steam out. You know, you don't need to spend that much money on it. This is a hindsight thing. Coming from someone who has never purchased new appliances for a kitchen, coming from me on that, I will tell you, you do not need an expensive hood. This was a waste of money. You can spend $800 on something. That doesn't mean that it comes with good directions, which it didn't. An operating manual, it didn't. Or an ease of an installation, it didn't. There are screws everywhere in this thing attaching it to that because there was no way to mount the stupid exhaust fan. Getting off on a tangent, and I won't. With the cabinets in place, we could start working on the ceiling. You're gonna see throughout this whole thing, and maybe you've seen it in previous seasons, I am quite the master at making confusing drawings for my dad. This drawing is the ceiling grid. Let's expand this image so you can see it better. In the top portion of this, that is the 9-foot height ceiling. Everything in this is measured based on where the upper cabinets were going to go and how far I needed the can lighting away from everything. This was made before we had torn out the ceiling, so I had no idea what the situation was with the floor joists up above. The lower part, everything was planned to be equidistant from each other along the back wall, equal on this side portion, you know, on either end. That was to make the lights make sense. What the grid is referencing is what the beadboard sections are going to be. I was not going to be spending the money on real beadboard. That's very expensive to cover an entire ceiling in. The beadboard in here was 4 foot by 8 foot MDF sheets that are just kind of the pattern is pressed into them. And going off of that, I knew, okay, we're gonna need 11 sheets of this. That's gonna cover all of the ceiling. To hide the seams so that you can't see all of this business going on, you're gonna need trim to cover it. We'll get to that. I had my lights. These are my favorite lights. I used them in my house in Minnesota, and I was like, I'm gonna use these effers again. They don't need a can. They're a flush mount. They have the cool nightlight effect. You'll see that momentarily. I'm forever grateful to my dad because he just about lost his mind trying to figure out the electrical for this and how to make it work in the way I want it. Redevising an entire electrical plan for a kitchen from scratch is not easy. Following your son's harebrained plans is also not easy. He stuck through it and did an amazing job, and so thanks, Dad. With the ceiling grid, all of these numbers are for the sizes of the panels. I forgot how hard this was. Each panel was almost a different size. 4 or 5 that were gonna be one dimension, 3 or 4 that were gonna be another dimension. You'd have a couple one-offs. Some were gonna have some gaps, and I knew there were also gonna be mistakes because I'm not perfect at measuring, and that's just the way the cookie crumbles. My parents were able to paint all of the panels in my dad's shop. I wanted them pre-painted to kind of ease up on the workload once they were installed because I hate painting ceilings, and if any of you out there are like, I love painting ceilings, good for you. I think you're in the minority. I think at this point I was living in the house. So when I was working my desk job, which was now here, my parents were doing this at their place, and all the panels were cut down to size. I think it was 2 coats of paint. This color is Egret White by Sherwin-Williams. I went back and forth with the folks at Sherwin-Williams on what finish to use because it's a ceiling, so you should use ceiling paint. But I thought, well, is it fine? Because it's not going on sheetrock, it's going on this. They said it would be fine. This was a learning experience also, where if you doubt something, just go with your gut. And I should have gone with my gut. And it's fine. We'll talk about it. And then it was time to install. Putting these up, the back of each panel is covered with construction adhesive to get it up on the sheetrock. And then I went around the perimeter of each one with the staple gun, with my nail gun, but staple attachment on the air compressor, and attached everything. And then I would do 2 or 3 rows of staples down each just to make sure it was on the ceiling. This is a time lapse of me putting up one of the panels. Because I'm so tall, it's easy for me to get up there, but I would use my head to support the middle of this thing. In theory, these are not heavy panels. They do become heavy, and you're trying not to break them and drop them. But the way this video ends, this image, I was so happy that I don't know why I'm getting emotional about this. I was so happy that a design component, really the first design component of this house, was starting to come to life. This was the first glimpse of making the house mine. Up to this point, it was sheetrock and some paint. I think the walls are painted in this picture, which was just a white and whatever. They're clearly not painted that anymore. But this image just kind of captured, and I shared it on Instagram, I remember. I was just so happy that something was finally happening. That wasn't construction, it was detail work. But there was also this fun thing. Okay.
God.
There it is. We found that when cutting out the holes in the panels for where the lights were going to go, which was incredibly stressful work because I'm not the best at measuring distances, so in theory I knew where everything was going to end up, but it had to be so exact to where the holes were cut into the sheetrock, and they all went fine. There weren't any screw-ups. The ceiling started coming together, and it was a bit of a chore to line up the grooves. They are all... No, they're not. They're all lined up on the lower portion. And I knew that once the trim pieces went onto it, that was going to hide any imperfections a bit better or mask them. This lower section was done, and then it was time to move to the upper. And again, I was just so happy. I was so excited with how it was coming together. In this upper portion, that was where we ran into a couple issues where the lines just weren't lining up. There was a little bit of fudging up there, but you absolutely cannot tell now that there's any issue. But once it was all up, the electrical was live. It was shut off, but the electrical, everything was ready, and we put the lights in, and the ceiling was lit up. And just having those lights on was such a monumental thing where at this point we were a couple months in and there had not been lights in the kitchen since like the first week, apart from like some floodlights that you'd run an extension cord to another room. So getting ceiling lights in was such a like thing. And with that ceiling in, I could start sheetrocking the hood for the oven. And then once the hood was installed, we turned to cutting the other hole for the pendant over the island. We did have to have an electrician come back out because there was a little bit of a issue with, at the time I had kind of a 2 pendant chandelier over the kitchen table, and the wiring had gotten a little confused between that and one of the cans. We got it fixed. There was also something with an outlet, I think, but we got it fixed. Well, there's those double pendants. Those are in the basement now. I didn't like them. No, I did like them. It was just too hot back here, so I had to put a ceiling fan in. As all this was going on, the counters had been measured. The appliances had been ordered months earlier. So the day came when all the appliances arrived, and I was super thrilled because who doesn't love new appliances? So we got fridge, and that's the wall oven microwave thing. So it'll be mounted about level with the top of the fridge. Dishwasher right there. And then the other stuff is washer and dryer. So they're very pretty. And it's good. And for the counters, I also ordered these from Home Depot. They are quartz. I wasn't sure what color I wanted. I knew I didn't want a pure white. It's very overwhelming shopping for this, especially if you've never done it before and you don't really have a strong sense of what your space is going to look like. Just in my mind, I had the game plan of what the colors were going to be. I went in looking at all of their stuff and ultimately decided on a special black counter. This black counter. You can call it the shallowness of me, or you can call it the side of me that looks for signs in all the things. I am a Capricorn. My birthday is right after Christmas, and the countertop is called Capricorn. So I saw it and I was like, oh shit, yeah, I'm gonna get that. That's what makes sense. And some of the pictures that I liked of kitchens of inspiration had been black counters. So I was like, yeah, let's do it. That was gonna take like a month and a half, I think, to come, maybe 2 months, and come it did. Home Depot partners with another company, a local. They were based maybe 45 minutes south of here. Super nice. This is what, the counter had to be split into 3 sections because with the stone, you can't have it so wide because you risk breaking it. This is the first section of Capricorn. Right away, I loved it. Everything was looking good. Immediately though, I was realizing you should have purchased a different color of sink just because I didn't like how the sink looked against it. But then it was in and I was just thrilled. I was thrilled with the counter. Very happy with it. In hindsight, this is not a mark against the counters. It's more of the area I live in. I mentioned it's hard water here and how the sink suffers from it. These counters in particular, the way that hard water leaves mineral deposits on it, even when the counter is pristinely clean, it looks like it has hard water because of that light veining that it has. Specifically behind the sink where there's a lot more of that white veining. So it just looks like it's always got watermarks even though it doesn't. So that's kind of a frustrating point. With those in, the induction cooktop went in. So the other thing that's cool is like that's your dial. One more thing about this cooktop, I got it to take advantage of the incentives from the, I don't know what it was called, Building Back America plan, whatever. If you upgraded electrical things, the government was going to give you back money. Ultimately, I'm not eligible for it because my income is too high. And not to say I'm rich, please don't misconstrue that as remotely rich. I just fall outside the bracket for really getting anything back for this, which is a real bummer because I do like to be on the right side of history when it comes to progress in energy and, renewables, all that stuff. This is a very finicky little bitch that if you get anything wet on it, it'll shut itself off. And I know that's a mark on the appliance, not the technology. It's this specific version from Samsung. But also if you spill hot water on it, you can't control the thing because it is touch. Everything is touch on it. And that little dial is a gimmick because it doesn't work well and it doesn't actually control your heat settings well. So that little magnet just sits up in the hood because it just takes up space and it's something to lose. I covered the counters in craft paper so that I could get all of the cabinets mounted up on the wall and start moving along that process so I could actually put my kitchen together. With that up and running, it was time to turn to painting. I mentioned last week that the colors for the kitchen were going to be the egret white colors for the ceiling, the white for the walls, which was snowbound, tricorn black as my accent color. Still water was the color for the cabinets, is the color of the cabinets, and it was the same color I used on the outside of the ranch. That meant that this room had 2 colors from the ranch, snowbound and still water. I should never reuse colors. I should never reuse colors from a negative experience, I'll say that. I did not love the ranch, and if you have questions about that, you can watch season 2. This color, at first I loved it. In the time since I painted it, I have determined that I'm just not really a fan in my own space of teal or greenish blue. I love the color, and I'll still see things on Instagram of the color and think, God, that's so pretty. I just know in my own space, it's not something I like. At the time, I painted it and I was like, oh, this is beautiful. And I loved it and I was happy with it. And it looked so great against the hardware. Here's the funny thing though. So I ordered these cabinets based on the fact that they were primed. And primed meant they're ready for you to paint them. Funny thing being, they were not primed. They were actually painted with an enamel paint. Me assuming that they were primed meant I just put the Sherwin-Williams enamel paint on it. We're good to go. It does take several days for that enamel paint to cure. I was very careful with it. After about 2 weeks though, I noticed the cabinets were chipping and they chipped more and more. And sometimes you just if you hit it with something firm but not sharp, it would chip even more. And I came to realize that I was supposed to, before I painted the cabinets, instead of assuming they were primed, I should have sanded them. Not sanded them to raw wood, but scuffed them up. Because I didn't, the paint did not adhere properly, which is another reason for phase 2. All of the cabinets need to be repainted, and if they all need to be repainted, you might as well pick a new color. That's that on that. Moving on to the flooring though, when the kitchen was redone in the 80s, they just did OSB underneath it. The original floors were long gone in here. Instead of continuing the wood floor from the rest of the house, that was going to be a budget thing that I should have looked into what the cost would have been, because I think it would have equated roughly to what I spent in here on the luxury vinyl tile that I purchased. I ended up going with this product from Life Proof. Again, it was a Home Depot product called Castle Black Slate. I liked it at first. Again, it's another thing where it's partly user error, where I was in such a hurry to get this down, and it was so easy to install. But the installation instructions I felt were not clear enough in telling you how to put this in. It clicks together, you don't need an underlayment. I was going to be hosting my parents' 50th wedding anniversary. I think from this photo, it might have been a few weeks later. Time was running out. Time was running out to get the house ready. I rushed through this. I did not take the time to secure the OSB flooring to the floor joists because there were squeaks. There are still squeaks because I didn't take care of that, and I should have. I also did not use a block to hit with a mallet to make sure that these pieces of flooring were as firm against each other as they should be. And because I did not do all that, the floor has started to separate, and it's just one of those things that you see it and it just pisses you off. Before I could go full tilt on installing the floor, we needed to get the other cabinets in for the fridge and the wall oven. I mentioned that RTA store did not sell what I needed. That meant my dad, he built my wall of cabinets for me. He built them from scratch, again, to my specifications, where I needed the cabinet for the oven and microwave, the cabinets above the fridge, and then next to it, if you watched last week's episode, you remember there is a chimney in the corner, so I couldn't have a full depth cabinet. So I needed a custom cabinet that only went back to the chimney, but everything on the front would look as one. So we start with the base for the big cabinet here, and it was a very reinforced base so that it could hold the weight. Then we got the big box in. This is for that lower portion down by my dad. That is a giant pull-out drawer for like cookie sheets, racks, all that jazz. Above it is the oven and microwave unit, goes in there. And then at the top is 2 cabinet doors, and that's just for storage. We are getting ready to put this behemoth in. It was impossibly heavy, but we got it in. We got it in with no issues. Everything was measured correctly. Everything was level. And it's always such a wonderful feeling when that happens and things work out the way they're supposed to. Because I feel like too often in life it just doesn't. I just remember with this, everything was done in stages because I was so concerned with screwing up measurements and because the ceiling was so warped and the walls weren't straight. Like there was an issue for everything in the house. I wanted that piece in before measuring for the one over the fridge, before measuring for the one next to the fridge. So with that in, he went back to building stuff and I worked on continuing the floors. It's just this huge expanse of this stuff. Wow. The floors though, at the time, I was just so excited with them because again, it was a finishing touch. It was something that was bringing the vision to life. And I moved through it super fast, as I said, mostly because I wasn't doing it right. In this photo here, you can see I was starting to paint the back door. And on the right there is the original kitchen cabinetry that they had painted kind of like a chalky blue. The previous owners painted it that. Move on to the kick plates for under the cabinets. I got those painted. Now that the floors were in, I could install the kick plates, have that cohesive, as evidenced in this photo. I got my rug in place. The kitchen was really starting to come together, which is when we now turn to the absolute most difficult part of the entire kitchen process. It was the thing that made me want to just curl up and die because it was so hard. Back to the ceiling grid. You remember our ceiling grid? Now it has been revised. Now you see colors on it. What those colors indicate are sizes of MDF boards. We purchased giant sheets of MDF and I needed it cut down. So I believe the blue, those are all 6-inch wide. Those were going to be covering the seams of the panels. That was our biggest band-aid to hide any issues that I had run into when installing it. The yellow ones are 4.5 inches wide, and those run the perimeter of the ceiling parallel to the floor. I didn't want all thick around everything, so thickest is in the middle, then it goes to those. The pink ones are 5 inches, and they are against the walls and run around the room. So that process started. And these, I used a nail gun and just went to town installing these damn things. It was not fun. It took a very long time. I did it alone because I find too often that I just insist on doing things alone because that's my MO and it's a blessing and a curse, but that's me. Maybe some of you are like that, and if you're like that too, let me know in the comments below. But as it was coming together, it was another like, holy shit, look at how the space is transforming. Look how different this is from what it used to be. And part of me was even like, oh, I kind of like the brown. No, you shouldn't keep it as MDF because it's not great quality stuff anyway. Like, you should paint it. Yeah, I was loving how it was looking. And as that was coming together, that meant putting the trim on everywhere else. So that was going to be window casings, door casings, and baseboards. With that meant painting other things. So this back bay window, very dry and sun damaged wood, water damaged. I wanted in the house all of the frames of the windows where appropriate. On all the wood, I wanted the framing black. That was the accent color, my tricorn black. Got that painted and then started putting trim up. And you can see that that trim was meant to replicate the original trim of the house. So you've got that crown molding, you have the little lip thing between the face and the side, I don't know. And as that was going on, I had to take out the windows over the kitchen sink, which are the original windows to when the house was built. Chip out all of the glazing around them. The glazing is like a putty that hardens and holds the windows in place. It was all destroyed, so the windows were barely in there. Instead of using new glazing, I just used caulk. This wasn't the best idea in hindsight. It holds them in place just fine. I feel like maybe the shelf life of this is not as long as glazing would have been, but these windows will get replaced anyway, so it's just a band-aid. Got that caulk on them, sealed, painted those all tricorn black. So this is the windows back in place over the kitchen sink with the original trim reinstalled. This trim was beat to shit, as evidenced by all the patchwork. Something I learned from round 1 of this house and how you patch stuff. Using caulk to fill nail holes is not the best idea because it does contract over time. In hindsight, I should have done wood putty on all of this and then sanded it smooth. I didn't. This is how we learn. I also learned over the years to caulk before you paint, not after, because dust and dirt collects on it. Here's another example of these. This is the basement door and the door into the pantry. All original woodwork, except these were missing their crown pieces. So the crown molding is now at the tops of those doors. Finally, the laundry room, when I purchased the house, had the swing and saloon doors to go into it. I wanted to bring up a door from the basement. It led into a little side room that I called the cold storage room. It was a little bit narrower and shorter than what that opening was. So my dad and I reframed the opening and built a door frame for this original door to the house so that I could use it to get into the laundry room. And also to close off the laundry room because, you know, if you're watching TV in the living room and you have the washer or dryer going, you can hear it. But if you shut that door, it's pretty quiet. You can still kind of hear it, but it's pretty quiet. And then here's me making my first pizza in the oven once it was connected. So with the trim up, we were moving on to painting it all. So all of the ceiling trim was going to be painted egret white to match the ceiling boards. This took forever. It took 3 coats. And here is where the problem with the ceiling paint comes in. I used caulking, obviously, to fill little gaps, more caulking in some areas than others. Sherwin-Williams did not force me to purchase anything. I chose to go with the ceiling paint rather than something else. They advised it should be fine. What has happened over time, it happened within about a year. Whatever oil is in the caulk came through the ceiling paint. So when you look at the ceiling when it's bright outside like it is right now, it looks like grease spots all along it, and it's really gross. In addition to the cabinets needing to be repainted, the ceiling needs to be repainted in either a higher quality wall paint or an enamel trim paint. I'll probably go with a wall paint because that should be fine. We'll determine that later. But this was the back door, now painted in the tricorn black, so you saw it getting prepped before. This door frame on it is actually what the original door frame into the parlor was. And because I opened that up so much, these were gonna be too short. So I figured, well, I can use it on another door. Being reused, recycled as much as I could with that original trim. This was painting the window, starting to get that process up and running. And then the doors. I will say at some point, I will probably strip the doors back down and fix things. Some foolish things that I did at the time are on display here, which this door, a lot of it was separating, and my resolution to fixing the separation of the door panels was to caulk it. That's gonna make it real hard when I decide to strip the door down because I'm gonna have to clean all that shit out. Again, hindsight's 2020. This is how we learn. Ceiling is done, looking good. The trim work is all done. Kitchen is bright and largely good to go. This is back by the kitchen table though. Everything just, oh, it looked so nice back then. Doors painted black, door into the laundry room. I felt no shame in painting that because that door was beat to hell. That door was in really bad. This thing of paintbrushes is just a prime example of how much I will have going at any given point in time. So there are 4 colors of paint in motion. I am a whirlwind when I start working on stuff, and I have ADHD, so I will hyper focus on things. To be fair to me, at this point in time, we are probably a week and a half out from hosting the anniversary party. The rate at which I was moving would shock you. It didn't do a lot for my mental health. We're almost to the end of part 2. Stick with me, guys. This was my original inspiration picture. I just really liked that trim around it. I thought that was great. Obviously the hood, because it was sheetrocked in and the thing takes up so much space, I wasn't gonna have a cabinet above it. Got some wood pieces and went on this adventure. Right now I am working on the hood, and I've got all the wood cut and I've been cutting all morning, but now I can't find the nail gun. And I like to think that I'm an organized person. I'm not, because like this is the rat's nest of a full bathroom downstairs that needs to get redone still. I have no idea where the nail gun is. I know where the staple gun is because that's what I've been using, but the nail gun's gone. Looks like I found it. So I started installing that trim work. This was my first attempt at using real wood and not MDF, and cutting everything so that it was going to work the way it was supposed to. And a funny thing happens when you do things the way they're supposed to be done is that they look really good. Up to this point, so let's say this is end of July 2023, I would take any shortcut that I could find. This episode is about the kitchen. Keep in mind, as the kitchen was happening, the entire rest of the house was happening. My work was not contained only to this. So up to this point, I had looked for shortcuts anywhere I could find them. A lot of those shortcuts have come back to bite me in the ass now, and I'm gonna have to pay for that. It's not bad, it's just me being particular. Putting this trim on the hood, like, it was beautiful. It turned out beautiful. I was so happy with it. And then I was going to do a multi-layered process with stain on it. So I wanted it to be a warm undertone, which meant using this like Cabernet stain color, I think, which when I put it on, I was just like, oh my God, what have you done? It was so ugly. In trusting the process, you know, you do 2 coats of the cab, and then I put the Kona on top. And I loved what the finished color was of it. It was a warm brown. I wanted to start injecting warmth into the kitchen, and this was going to be the way to do it at the time. This has all changed since then. That is with some polyurethane on it as well. So that was the hood. Final section, painting the rest of the cabinets. So my dad got the other cabinets built for over the fridge and off to the side. And with those in place, I could start painting the Stillwater blue on them, getting those wrapped up. They looked beautiful, and in person, unless I pointed out, you can't tell that those cabinets are different from these cabinets. They are almost indistinguishable as the same, which is fantastic. And my dad did a really fantastic job on it. During that painting process though, Paolo liked to investigate and help and hang out with me, my little companion. With all the cabinets in though, it was time to connect the cabinet boxes to the ceiling so that I could finish off the rest of the trim. This was a painstaking process. It wasn't easy. I don't like how it turned out either. And this is another portion of phase 2 for the kitchen of what needs to get fixed, just because I could have done it better. And I will. Connected all the boxes to the ceiling, which on its own felt so amazing because I didn't have to look at anything raw, any more raw sheetrock or background timber, anything. Once that was all connected, look at that, how happy I am. In this picture, you can see the boxes on top of the cabinets have been painted, so it's pretty seamless. And I have started installing the finish trim for the ceiling itself, which was gonna butt up against those. And then it was done. And my hair was long. Oh, it looks like a halo over my head. I'm so angelic. Yeah, it was done. The kitchen largely was finished. And at this point, we're getting into fall. You know, it wasn't this finished before the anniversary party. I think everything was done except for the boxes on top of the cabinets. And yeah, that was it. I had a functioning kitchen that largely looked the way the initial design said. Now, that wraps up part 2 of making the kitchen. We have got one more part to this kitchen experience, and that is next week with part 3, customizing the kitchen. We're going to talk about the island, the design for it and how it was built, the spice rack that you see behind me, all of the stages that the hood over the cooktop went through, the custom trash bin cabinet that my dad built, repainting the kitchen, how I got rid of the old dining table and refinished a super cheap one from Facebook Marketplace, and then ultimately the before and afters. Please join me next week for that. If you have any questions on anything that you saw today, anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask. Leave them below, or you can reach out to me through Instagram at restoring_Sean. I'm happy to answer your questions. I love talking to you guys, and I love the little things that you pick up on in these videos that I may or may not have said or that I alluded to, because you guys are very perceptive and it's very fun for me. Until next week, take care. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon.